Good evening. So glad to have you here this evening. My name is Todd Freeman. I'm superintendent for Vestavia Hills City Schools. I want you to join me in standing for the national anthem that will be led tonight by our Vestavia Hills High School Band Director, Mr. Terrell Horton.
Oh, say can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Wow, that was amazing. I am not going to sing. So good evening and welcome to the kickoff of the 50th anniversary of the Vestavia Hills school system. I would like to extend a special thank you to Dr. Chris Pennington, Mr. Andy Carpenter, and Ms. Donna Morgan for hosting us tonight in this beautiful school. Tonight we also celebrate the opening of the Louis Pizitz Middle School, so it seems very appropriate that we are back here where it all started. Chip and Dan Heath, in their book, The Power of Moments, state that our lives are measured in moments, and defining moments are the ones that endure in our memories. Today we add to those memories by celebrating an important milestone in the history of the Vestavia system. It is because of many essential moments that we are able to stand here and reflect on the successes that have brought us to this particular time and place. The halls of our schools are filled with memories that have made a positive impact on the lives of students. Some moments happen by chance, and some are created intentionally by offering opportunities for students to learn without limits. Today we are excited to be able to induct our inaugural class into the Vestavia Educator Hall of Fame. These educators and administrators have exceeded what it means to deliver exceptional education and leadership throughout the years. But even as we honor these extraordinary individuals, we know that there are hundreds more that continue to make a difference every day in doing the work it takes to educate thousands of students. Synergy is the principle behind the phrase, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, and this is especially true of the Vestavia system. Vestavia is known for its academic excellence, development of character, demonstration of integrity, and commitment to service. And while this may have been just the goal 50 years ago, it has been achieved through the efforts and commitment of hundreds of teachers, staff, administrators, parents, and students who have walked the hallways. It's also been achieved by the unceasing support of our wonderful community, city officials, and political leaders. We are honored to have many distinguished guests with us tonight that have been instrumental in the history of the system, as well as those who continue to make an impact on our community. And I'm going to recognize some of them are here present, and some of them had to step out. But I'd like to recognize our state leaders, Senator Jabba Wagner, Representative David Wheeler, our city elected officials, Mayor Ashley Curry, Councilman George Pierce, Councilwoman and Board Liaison, Mrs. Kimberly Cook, our Vestavia Hills City Manager, Mr. Jeff Downs, President and CEO of the Vestavia Hills Chamber of Commerce, Ms. Karen Odell, distinguished member of the Vestavia Hills City Schools Foundation, Mrs. Tate Stoddard, and then former members of the Board of Education who were involved in the acquisition of the Berry campus. Mrs. Kim Pruitt, Dr. Nat Robin, Mr. Jerry Dent, Mr. Mark Hogwood, Mr. David Powell, and Judge Sheree Grant. Please join me in showing our appreciation to our guests. And now it's my pleasure to introduce the Honorable Mayor Curry to say a few remarks.
All right, thank you and good evening. Well, 50 years ago, our city created its school system. At that time, the city leaders wanted someone to come in and create a new school system, not just to have a school system, but to have a school system that would offer the finest education possible. Well, they selected Bill Clark to serve as first superintendent, and thus began the Vestavia City Schools. Mr. Clark possessed the requisite leadership abilities and skills for developing educational programs. Prior to coming to Vestavia, he had been the superintendent of the Bessemer City Schools. Well, his first order of business was to hire the best teachers he could find. He continued that type of hiring until his retirement in 1979. That was a quest for excellence that started in 1970, and it continues to this day. Our superintendent, Todd Freeman, has maintained and grown a culture of excellence. What a joy for me to be here today and recognize this inaugural Hall of Fame class. Our inductees represent the essence of excellence that this school system and its founders envisioned. I've had the honor of knowing and working with each of the recipients. I worked with Coach Anderson. This has been 30 years ago. I was on the Parks and Rec board. We didn't have anywhere to play recreational sports, and Coach Anderson helped us with that. And of course, that relationship with the schools and the joint use of fields has continued to this day. David Miles was the principal at Pizitz when my children were there. And on a side note, I bet y'all didn't know that his dad, Ralph, was a retired FBI agent when I transferred to Birmingham with the FBI in 1980. So I had the pleasure of knowing his father. Carlton Smith was the superintendent during my children's entire tenure with the schools, and I will forever be indebted to him for accommodating my daughter, Anna, when she was on crutches or in a wheelchair too many times to even count. Both of my children had K for AP Calculus, and my son was on the math team. I am very familiar with the success of the math teams, and Kay, thank you for that. Last but not least, I have attended church with Helen Holly for 30 plus years, and she did so much for creating excellence during her tenure. Each of them contributed so much to our schools, and it is only fitting that we honor them today. Thank you.
Well, hello, my name is Chris Pennington, the principal here at Pizitz Middle School. Before we go any further, I would like to recognize somebody that without his leadership and perseverance through the tough times and good times, we would not be in this building today. Dr. Patrick Martin, thank you so much for the job you've done for us. Dr. Martin has an outstanding team, a support crew that has just taken every time that there's been a curve, they've been able to take it and run with it and turn everything that could have been an extreme challenge and made it look very, very easy. So we're very, very, very happy for the job that the support crew has done for us to get in this building. So 50 years ago, Vestavia citizens formed and initiated a school system that would serve the needs and expectations of their community. Along with that came facilities dedicated to serve as a laboratory for delivery of instruction and use of resources to support student learning. Louis Pizitz Middle School would come to service these needs for all adolescent children in the community the many years ahead, and in most cases by itself. During this time, Pizitz Middle School would grow to quickly become one of the premier middle schools in the nation. Recognition for outstanding academic, elective, athletic, and arts education experiences contributed to a rich legacy that soon became known for three simple but powerful words: character, excellence, family. 50 years later, Louis Pizitz Middle School opens the doors on a new campus to service the growing middle school student population in our community. Advances in learning require specialized attention to the rapidly changing needs of our global economy. This requires specific attention to cross-curricular and project-based learning, which supports collaborative learning experiences between students, as well as opportunities for career technology courses such as robotics, coding, drone development, and advanced family consumer sciences. Increased specialization in athletics and arts education also requires expanded facility and resource needs to remain competitive in today's education market. Our new campus provides space to support these learning opportunities, but it lacked the essential legacy established within the walls of the previous campus long, long ago. A new building without indication of a legacy established at a previous building is just a building. So it was imperative that visual representation of past achievements and campus culture be visible so that all who come to our campus be reminded of what was started so many years before. You see these visual reminders throughout our buildings, most notably in the front lobby, cafeteria, administrative offices, gyms, electives, and student commons areas, otherwise known as the Pirates Cove, serve as a representation of the legacy that has been established. Reminders of past accomplishments and school culture do nothing by themselves to continue the legacy at Pizitz Middle School. It requires contributions of today's incredible instructional and support staff and leadership to ensure that what was built for us is still here 50 years from now. We must continue to innovate and adapt to service the needs of our students in Vestavia Hills, and yes, do so at times under some tremendously challenging circumstances. With continued support from our board, city leaders, parents, and community members, I have no doubt that we will add to the legacy of Pizitz Middle School. In doing so, we dedicate this new campus to those who came before us. Those of us who are here now as stewards of this outstanding institution, and to those who come after us to carry on the tradition and legacy we worked so hard to maintain. From Pizitz, our nation's best, we follow the simple and memorable slogan and creed: character, excellence, family, where Pirates lead, others follow. Go Pirates, and thank you.
Vestavia Hills City Schools is celebrating 50 years of learning without limits.
People say hey, why don't you move to Vestavia? It's for the school system.
It's a national brand.
A great source of civic pride.
What made Vestavia or Vestavia schools? And I tell people all the time, consistency.
With an annual budget of over $90 million and 800+ employees, the school system serves 7,100 students across 5 elementary schools, 2 middle schools, a freshman campus, and a high school. It began in 1968 with residents organizing to form their own school system.
The success of Vestavia, the people of Vestavia, they wanted a better school system. They wanted to have more control of their school system, and they also were going to support their school system.
But we had to have the money to start the school. And so the biggest issue was the tax base. And so we had to have a vote of whether they would accept, the community would accept this additional tax to support a school system for the city of Vestavia Hills.
The vote passed, and on April 30th, 1970, the Vestavia Hills Board of Education was formed.
One of the first ingredients you have to have in grades K through 12 is a strong faculty.
The teachers formed a very close bond with each other and with our students because we were working so hard. It wasn't 8 to 3. It was 8 to maybe 10 at night sometimes.
It was wonderful. You know, everything was a first. We were the first group of rebelettes.
My class, we chose our nickname, we chose, the colors.
Our band was really good, and the students would start yelling, "That's our band, that's our band." And you just felt, everybody was supporting you.
The pillars of Vestavia Hills City Schools.
To may have a great school system, you got to have 3 things. You got to have great students, great personnel, and great parents. If you got those 3 things, then you're going to have a great school system.
We are proud of the accomplishments of 50 years of fantastic achievements in academics. The crux of a school system is to prepare students for life. And that transcends more than academics. It transcends more than arts, athletics. It's about character.
The parents and the community expect their students to learn how to be a good citizen and how to give back and how to serve others and how to make their community a better place.
What we know about students today is when they graduate high school and then graduate college, they will not stay in jobs in the length of time that we stayed in jobs growing up. They're going to constantly be moving. So what education in the future is more about their skills and their ability to adapt, to communicate with others, to work together with others.
When I was growing up, I feel a lot of education was around, here's this knowledge that you must learn. The Battle of Hastings was in 1066. Now you can ask Siri when the Battle of Hastings, was. The question now is, how do you have context around that? How do you have critical thought around this piece of information? And how do you decide what's a good source or not?
Supporting faculty and staff in putting students first.
When I first started, it was my first year, and that was intimidating back then to be a first-year teacher in the Vestavia system. But the support was phenomenal. When Oseline Carty really had my first years, I can remember her coming in at least every other day. She would walk through the classrooms, pat you on the back, and say a positive, "You're doing a great job. I love your room today. Look at the smiles on those children." That's all you need as a teacher.
Here, when I was matched with my mentor here, Mrs. Hurt, and
She did very well in guiding me when I needed answers to questions. A lot of those questions she knew thorough answers to because, of course, she was teaching 5th grade too. So they matched you with someone who really understood what you were going through.
The kids coming happy from school, wanting to go back every day. I mean, you had that feeling in the first day, you know, like parents crying and kids, what is going to happen? But from day one is something that you can tell how much they love it and they like it.
I have a 5th grader at East, a 7th grader at Pizitz, and a sophomore at the high school. And just the fact that my kids love going to school, there's never been a day that they didn't. They feel very involved. They feel accepted.
From day one, when I meet my students, my focus is always inspiration. I want to inspire you to have that autonomy to go out and do something productive with that time, with that energy.
That's what I want from my teachers and for me it was great, and I want to see that with my kids as well, is that teachers who recognize their talents and their skill set and then encourage them to do that.
The arts programs that I experienced from elementary school all the way through high school absolutely shaped where I am now. Music in high school for me was really about how do I treat other people? How can I be a leader? How can I be kind? By the time I left high school, I really felt quite secure in who I was, enough so to do things that I wouldn't have done when I first came into high school. I went into my undergrad as a music education major because I wanted to influence people in the same way that my teachers influenced me.
Over the course of time that we'll spend at Vestavia, there's going to be a small percentage of people that will actually be professional musicians, but our goal is that 100% of them will be professional people.
We are a community of folks who are pursuing excellence in our professional lives, and we want to see that in our schools, because I think for the most part we understand that school, that education is the foundation for success.
What I love about Vestavia is the fact that we're in both, right? Is that we want to excel in the classroom and we want to be competitive on the field of play. For every Coach Anderson, there's a Kay Tipton. So Coach Anderson being great on the football field and Kay Tipton dominating math team nationally. For every Sammy Dunn, there's a Marilee Dukes that was winning debate championships while Coach Dunn is winning baseball championships. And the fact that we excel in both of those is, to me, one of our distinctives.
Over the course of 50 years, Vestavia Hills has earned 132 team and individual state championships in 14 different sports.
In the 1990s, we were having tremendous success athletically. I remember one year we had 5 state championships.
When you look at the people that were a part of that athletic department, their sole motivation was to help the kids. They were truly focused on their student athletes and what was best for them. And winning was a byproduct of everything that they taught.
Coach Dunn taught me years ago, you don't win games. You win the kids, and the kids win the games.
I played for Sammy Dunn, and his love was always tough love, but you knew he loved you.
One thing I can say is I've never been around someone that could get people to perform at their best day in and day out as well as he could. Winning the 9 state championships in 10 years, winning a national title, and just the ultimate success that was around his programs is something that was just so impressive.
Kids are still kids, though. They're still looking for something to belong to. They're looking for something to be a part of. They're looking for love. They're looking for acceptance. They're looking to be part of something bigger than themselves. First of all, I hadn't never dreamed that I would still be here when I first started here. And Coach Reynolds hired me in January of 1972. I thought I might be here 3, 4, 5 years and be somewhere else, and just never dreamed it. But, you know, God had other plans. People say, man, you must love those teams that are state champions. Yes, I did, but, you know, we had some teams that went 2-8, and I love those kids just as much. And be one miserable person feels all just about whether they succeeded athletically or not, because, and here again, every kid doesn't have the same talent, and you have to have a lot of kids that are real talented to be to win a lot of games, but we want to see you be great husbands and great wives. We want to see you be great sons and daughters. I tell them all the time, being a great parent, that's a great accomplishment because they're dealing with the future, just as every year we're dealing with the future when we're dealing with kids.
Students at Vestavia Hills High School have donated more than $2.2 million to support cancer research in just the past decade. Students at all 8 schools have come together to donate millions more for charitable causes both locally and globally.
Years ago, it was a lot about what we could do for the students, and the students finally turned that around and said, let's look and see what we can do for others.
At the high school this year, for example, we have about 2,000 students, and 90% of those students are in clubs. Most of those clubs are 100% service focused, but all of them give back in some way and participate in service activities.
So in 2010, we applied for a Blue Ribbon Award. So the lady at the Blue Ribbon Committee called me one afternoon, and she goes, I believe that you have put a section in the wrong section on your Blue Ribbon report. I said, what? She goes, this section on charitable giving. I said, no ma'am. I said, I think I put that in there under curriculum. She goes, yes, but it shouldn't be under curriculum. Curriculum is really what you're just teaching the students. I said, no ma'am. Teaching our students to be charitable givers is part of our curriculum. Our fall charities, our giving to RISE or the Cancer Society, that's part of our culture. And that is part of the curriculum. We expect that every one of our kids to have that kind of ingrained in them, that we're supposed to help our brother.
A proud moment when you see that these kids are going, and you hope that we're teaching them something that's going to pay off later in life, that they're not going to look at what am I going to get out of this, but how can I help my fellow man? How can I be a better citizen? That's the whole thing that evolves from this play one role, you play us all.
A constant of the school system since its founding is unparalleled community support. The Vestavia Hills City Schools Foundation has donated more than $1.3 million since its inception in 1996, and the Vestavia Hills City Schools PTO has donated more than $1.9 million to the schools in the past 5 years alone.
That's one of the things that sets us apart, is our citizenry's desire to give back. People willing to give their time and their experience for this entity is unheard of in many communities.
When you start getting to help and volunteer and see the difference that it makes, to make things successful, or for the kids to have a great experience, for things to really work, it's priceless.
That pillar of excellence is there, that our students want to excel and be great at everything they do, but that's backed by this incredible support, whether it's support from each other, student to student, support from their teachers, teacher to student, or community, parent to student. We are all here in Vestavia Hills community to support these kids, to support them in their endeavors.
Since its start in 1970, the school system has experienced continuous growth. What started in a community of 8,300 residents and 2,500 students in just 2 schools has grown to more than 35,000 residents and more than 7,000 students across 9 campuses.
People realize when they get away from here and get away in other places, the specialness of this place. It's just tremendous.
All of our kids live here, and which to me is one of the main things about a community, when your children want to come back and live where they grew up.
We had a serious problem that's been at Vestavia since I have started going here, which we just didn't have enough space.
So what we have is a demand that outpaces our infrastructure. And for many years, our Board of Education, our prior superintendents dating back to Dr. Blair, did a really good job of saving money.
That was the important thing financially, was to provide what the kids need and more, plus at the same time, provide for future needs of future children and their education.
We had the opportunity to pick up a school over in Columbiana that's 30 acres, already had a school on it. So we were able to acquire that, and that created opportunity for us. And then Jefferson County had approached us about the Gresham Dolly Ridge campus. And so here's an opportunity to buy another school in our city footprint. So we were able to acquire that. And then that gave us a lot of opportunity to say, okay, how do we think about this differently? Now that we have capacity, what makes the most sense?
So we've realigned, we've restructured, and we've made ourselves more efficient and able to deliver a better quality service and product to our citizens over the next 10 or 20 years.
Education today looks very different than it did 50 years ago. Today is becoming more and more about providing individual, more prescribed opportunities for every child. If you think about 7,000 prescriptions for students, that's where our education system is moving.
I think we're on the right track. We're expanding, but yet we're keeping that continuity. We're keeping the community.
I can say is, my kids are gonna be out of here. I continue to offer my help as long as I can. I just hope that the system continue to do that for 50 more years.
We're really genuinely thankful for all the teachers and all the mentors and all the people who went above and beyond and cared for me as I grew up in this community.
And this is a community who has learned to grow. In other words, we didn't just create a model in 1970 and this is what we're going to do. This community has continually challenged itself to get better each year.
We don't have to look too far, 'cause home is always in our hearts. Oh no, we don't have to look too far. Home is always close, it's always in our hearts. No matter where we go, no matter where we are, we don't have to look too far. Oh no, we don't have to look too far. Home is always close, it's always in our hearts. No matter where we go, no matter where we are, we don't have to look too far. Oh no, oh no, oh no. No matter where we go, no matter where we are, we don't have to look too far.
I believe that children are our future. Teach them well and let them lead the way. Show them all the beauty they possess inside. Give them a sense of pride to make it easier. Let the children's laughter remind us how we used to be. Everybody's searching for a hero. People need someone to look up to. I never found anyone to fulfill my needs. A lonely place to be. And so I learned to depend on me. I decided long ago never to walk in anyone's shadow. If I fail, if I succeed, at least I live children are our future. Teach them well and let them lead the way. Show them all the beauty they possess inside. Give them a sense of pride to make it easier. Let the children's laughter remind us how we used to be. I decided long ago never to walk in anyone's shadow. If I fail, if I succeed, at least I live as I believe. No matter what they take from me, they can't take away my dignity, because the greatest love of all is happening to me. Learning to love yourself, it is the greatest love of all. The greatest love of all. It's easy to achieve. Learning to love yourself is the greatest love of all. And if by chance that special place that you've been dreaming of leads you to a lonely place, find your strength in love.
I'm convinced if I keep working on Mr. Horton, he's going to get really good at singing. I should ask Representative David Wheeler to join me up for a few moments. Representative Wheeler last week offered to develop a resolution commemorating this special occasion and wanted him to share that with you. Representative?
Thank you. On behalf of Senator Wagner and myself, I offer this resolution celebrating the 50th anniversary of Vestavia Hills City Schools. Whereas it is our distinct privilege to extend highest commendations and congratulations to Vestavia Hills City Schools on the occasion of their 50th anniversary. And whereas Vestavia Hills Board of Education was founded on April 30th, 1970, shortly after the city's residents voted in favor of levying a property tax for the formation of the city school system. Vestavia Hills City Schools opened in August of 1970 with only 2 schools and approximately 2,500 students. Whereas 2 schools that opened were an elementary school, which is now Vestavia Hills Elementary East, and a junior high named Louis Pizitz Middle School. High school students were given an option to attend Vestavia High School, which at the time had no campus, or they could remain at Vestavia High School, this site right here. Whereas 50 years later, there are more than 7,100 students attending schools on 9 campuses, with the newest being the Pizitz campus in the former W.A. facility. And whereas in celebration of the 50th anniversary of the Vestavia Hills City School Hall of Fame has been established to honor educators and staff members who have left a lasting legacy on the history of our school system. The nominations were received from the public in the spring of 2020, and the Hall of Fame committee selected 5 inductees, who are as follows: Betty Anderson, longtime head football coach at Vestavia Hills High School; Helen Holly, first principal of Vestavia Hills Elementary, Liberty Park; David Miles, former principal at Louis Pizitz Middle School; Dr. John Carlton Smith, former superintendent, Vestavia Hills City Schools, and Kay Tipton, former mathematics teacher and Mu Alpha Theta founder at Vestavia Hills High School. Now, therefore, be it resolved that we highly commend and congratulate Vestavia Hills City Schools upon the celebration of their 50th years of educational service to our community, and by a copy of this resolution, we extend our highest tribute and deepest admiration, along with best wishes for continued success.
When the doors of Vestavia Hills City Schools opened on August 31st, 1970, a commitment was made by this community to provide an exemplary education for its children. The pioneers and architects of this fledgling school system had a vision that we would be the shining star for the community. For the past 50 years, Vestavia Hills City Schools has been that beacon of excellence, with incomparable teachers, staff, community and parent support, and most of all, our students. To quote the words of Mr. Pat Boone, it is indeed the best kept secret in America. For a school system to strive to be the best and reach the pinnacle of excellence, there must be a total commitment and a long-term investment from the citizens of a community. Ask anyone who lived here during the inception of the school system about the dedication it took to open the doors and keep them open. They will assuredly tell you that the sacrifice for children was worth every penny and every drop of sweat. As you saw in the video, these sacrificial efforts have become a trademark of our school system. When my family moved to Vestavia Hills, what compelled us to be a part of this unique place were the values of the community and the beliefs of the school system. What you heard the alumni and long-term residents articulate so well is what we have experienced in just 2.5 short years. This is a school system that lives out what it believes. Respect, faith, trust, work ethic are more than just words. They are actions that have thrived from within our system since 1970, and they are the foundation that distinguishes this remarkable place. Gold is a symbol that we ascribe to things of great value. Google defines the gold standard as the best, most reliable thing of its type. In many respects, Vestavia Hills City Schools is considered the gold standard of education because of the entrenched shared commitment of our governing leaders, community, and staff. Our history tells us clearly that Vestavia Hills benefits most when the partnership between the school system and city government is strong. Ms. Sarah Wuska penned a letter to me several months ago that serves as an example of the long-term consequences when city leaders and the school system work together. She summarized that as the population of Vestavia Hills was growing, it was incumbent on the school system to have the necessary space to educate them. The City Council worked closely with the school system and the Pizitz family to secure property for what would become Vestavia Hills High School. This site was added to East and property already donated by the Pizitz family that is now the freshman campus. Similar efforts over the years led to the acquisition of properties that became West, Central, and Dolly Ridge elementary schools. The new Louis Pizitz Middle School campus is another great example of the benefits of this strong partnership. From the outset of the purchase of the Berry campus, our city leaders committed to be a part of the efforts of the school system to plan for student enrollment increases. This commitment extended through the design, renovation, and build-out of the campus. You can go no farther than this room we are in or outside the beautiful athletic fields behind you to see how this collaborative approach will serve all of the children in Vestavia Hills and the goal to provide impeccable community spaces. The theme of working together is a common thread throughout our history. Intentional efforts have been made to provide a high-quality education to all our children. As the city boundaries expanded to include Liberty Park and Cahaba Heights, this same level of commitment and collaboration prevailed. While our school system has subsequently grown from 2,500 students in 1970 to over 7,100 students today, the commitment of our city leadership has not wavered. This partnership is the gold standard of working together to enhance the quality of life for everyone. Another one of the cornerstones of the success of our system is the unparalleled community support we receive and that you've heard from. As you heard from Ms. Phillips, in one of its first and most important efforts, the City and Board advanced a successful tax initiative to provide necessary financial support. This has been followed up numerous times over the past 50 years and has always received the support of our citizens. This year is no different, and in fact epitomizes the willingness of our communities to step up anytime the schools are in need. Our PTOs have already had very successful fundraising events to provide support for our schools. Service organizations have created new models of support. Our partners in education are finding innovative ways to contribute to the learning experience of our students in unusual times. And recently, the Vestavia Hills City Schools Foundation committed $130,000 in grants to schools to provide instructional supplies needed during this unique school year. And this is in addition to the record-setting amount of over $140,000 given this spring. Leadership Vestavia Hills worked with the school system this spring to provide meals for students through a creative project that supported local restaurants. These are perennial examples of the gold standard of community engagement we have at Vestavia Hills. As we all know and appreciate, the people who are invested in an organization are what make it special. Throughout its history, Vestavia Hills City Schools has been blessed with teachers, administrators, and support staff who have poured their hearts and souls into providing every child the opportunity to learn without limits. In the beginning days of our system, Superintendent Bill Clark worked tirelessly to hire the best and brightest educators. Since then, community, city, and school leadership perpetually recognize that a great school cannot exist without great teachers. Exceptional teachers adeptly guiding our students in their learning endeavors is the distinguishing factor in our success. Rarely a day passes that I do not hear a story about a teacher who literally transformed the lives of students. One meaningful experience that comes to mind is during the breakfast I had last year with my friend, the late Dr. Carlton Smith. As we entered our neighbors down the street, the ranch house, there were 3 former teachers sitting together. Dr. Smith, always so gracious and kind to put others first, wanted to introduce me to them. And he spent most of our breakfast bragging on how special they were, how they brought greatness to our system, and how they genuinely loved students. And one of them happens to be an honoree with us tonight. And speaking of our honorees, I want to share some of our other compliments with meanings that echo through the memories of so many alumni and families in Vestavia Hills. Ms. Holly created a culture of love for learning and investment in students that is unmatched. Mr. Miles was a student advocate and preached that it's all about relationships. Dr. Smith was a true visionary, a prince of a man, and an exemplary leader for our community. He chose a life of service and did it exceptionally well. Ms. Tipton was beloved by students, not only for her ability to teach, but also for the way she invested in those students. Coach Anderson was a teacher in everything he did. All of it reflected his values and high standards. He gave that to all of us. That's his legacy. It's his reputation. That is his blueprint. This evening, I have the special privilege and great honor to introduce the inaugural inductees of the Vestavia Hills City Schools Hall of Fame. Collectively, these 5 inductees have dedicated over 139 years of service and counting to our school system, serving as teachers, coaches, and administrators. They exemplify the beliefs and values of Vestavia Hills. They are the gold standard for what makes our school system the best. They are the cornerstones of education in Vestavia Hills, and their legacy of greatness lives on in the work of our stellar teachers who are educating our next generation of leaders today. Inductees, I want to introduce you to some very important people to me and to our entire community and schools, our Board of Education. You met one a little bit earlier this evening, our Board President, Dr. Lisa Baker, our Vice President, Mr. Steve Bendall, Ms. Jennifer Weaver, Ms. Jacqueline Hudson, and Mr. Scott Brown. We appreciate them so much, and recently they approved resolutions to honor each member of this inaugural class. So I would like to recognize each inductee by reading the resolution written in their honor. And when I call the inductees' names, I would like to have them and or their family members join me in front of the podium here. After reading each inductee's resolutions, they or their family are invited to share any words that are on their hearts tonight. All right, let's get started. Our first honoree is Buddy Anderson. You all have to stand up here, Stacy. I've spent 2.5 years getting to know this fine man, and most of what he talks about is not football, it's about what's in front of this podium. So you got to be here. Whereas the Board of Education for the City of Vestavia Hills, Alabama was established on April 30th, 1970, and whereas the Vestavia Hills City Schools is celebrating its 50th anniversary by honoring the educators who have dedicated themselves to providing every student the opportunity to learn without limits. And whereas Buddy Anderson has been an educator employed with the Vestavia Hills City Schools since 1972. Had the school system started by then? And over his 48-year career at Vestavia Hills High School, and whereas Coach Anderson has served as a head football coach, assistant football coach, mathematics teacher, assistant principal, and athletic director over his 48-year career at Vestavia Hills High School. And whereas Coach Anderson has compiled a record of more than 343 wins during 42 seasons as head football coach, thus making him the winningest coach at any level of competitive football in Alabama history. And whereas Coach Anderson led the Rebels to take championships in football in 1980 and 1998. And whereas Coach Anderson has exemplified leadership for generations of Vestavia Hills high school students and student athletes. And whereas Coach Anderson announced his retirement from full-time service effective July 1st, 2020, and retirement as head football coach following the conclusion of the 2020 season. And whereas the Board of Education wishes to honor Coach Anderson for his lifetime of service and impact on thousands of lives in the city of Vestavia Hills and beyond, now therefore be it resolved by the Board of Education for the city of Vestavia Hills, Alabama, that the board hereby recognizes and congratulates Buddy Anderson as an inaugural inductee in the 2020 class of the Vestavia Hills City Schools Hall of Fame. Be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution shall be recorded upon the minutes of this meeting and a copy presented to Coach Anderson, adopted and approved by the Board of Education for the City of Vestavia Hills, Alabama, this the 28th day of September 2020. Congratulations, Coach Anderson.
Dr. Freeman, I'll be brief with what I have to say, and I'm just thankful that all my family wasn't able to be here tonight. It was a busy schedule, but my daughter Stacy and grandson Cooper and my beautiful wife Linda with me tonight. And it's been, it's hard to believe that it's been 49 years, but that's what it's been. And I've seen see a lot of you out here, that some of you that I've coached and some of you that I've worked with through the years. And I think back to those first years, and I can remember, just tell you a quick story. I started in my student teaching in spring of 1972, and I asked Coach Reynolds, I said, Coach, where do we practice? Because everybody was at Pizitz. We had East, and then we had Pizitz, and Pizitz was the high school and middle school, and I think we also had maybe 4th and 5th grade there. And so we do PE, and it's like we had bowling in the halls, we had wrestling up on the stage, we had gymnastics up on the upper part of the stage, we'd have basketball on the 2 sections, and then we'd have a tug of war out on the road and where Big Bertha came around, and then we had running laps around Big Bertha, and we had volleyball going on in the parking lot right there in front of the school. That was just 1 period a day. We did that 6 periods a day. You had that, you had every space taken up. And then I asked Coach, where are we where do we practice? And those of you know Coach Reynolds, I gotta use his voice. And he says, Coach, the city runs the garbage truck and they get through about 2 o'clock and they come over, they wash them out and they come over and pick up our kids and take them over to high school. I said, you're kidding me, Coach. No, Coach, that's how we get up there. We ride the garbage trucks. And I had to follow the garbage truck my first day to even know how to get to the high school. And sure enough, and I've got some pictures at home someone gave me of our kids riding the garbage truck. And that's where we started. Can you think of any kids that would ride a garbage truck now to practice? But we start with that. And those are humble beginnings where we are now. Thank you.
Ms. Helen Holly. Whereas the Board of Education for the City of Vestavia Hills, Alabama was established on April 30th, 1970, and whereas the Vestavia Hills City Schools is celebrating its 50th anniversary by honoring the educators who have dedicated themselves to providing every student the opportunity to learn without limits. And whereas Helen Holly is an educator who was employed with Vestavia Hills City Schools from 1993 to 2012. And whereas Ms. Holly served as an assistant principal at Vestavia Hills Elementary East and the first principal of Vestavia Hills Elementary Liberty Park during her 19-year career in the school system. And whereas Ms. Holly played a pivotal role in all aspects of the planning, opening, and exponential growth of Liberty Park Elementary. And whereas Ms. Holly laid the foundation for the social and emotional support of all students with an emphasis on student leadership reflected through the words of the Liberty Park Creed. And whereas Ms. Holly modeled a positive, energetic spirit for all students and staff throughout her years of leadership in the school system. And whereas Ms. Holly believed that every day was a great day for learning and all should take advantage of it. And whereas the Board of Education wishes to honor Ms. Helen Holly for her lifetime of service and impact on thousands of lives in the city of Vestavia Hills and beyond. Now therefore be it resolved by the Board of Education for the city of Vestavia Hills, Alabama, that the board hereby recognizes and congratulates Helen Holly as an inaugural inductee into the 2020 class of Vestavia Hills City Schools Hall of Fame. Be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution shall be recorded upon the minutes of this meeting and a copy presented to Ms. Holly, adopted and approved by the Board of Education for the City of Vestavia Hills, Alabama, this the 28th day of September 2020. Congratulations, Ms. Holly.
Yes, please sit down. Y'all, the reason I'm up here is because of you. There are teachers here, there are parents, there are so many of you, and we all work together. And that's what makes Vestavia Hills work. And that's what makes it the place it is. It is a place where we come together for our children. And since it was mentioned about the Liberty Park Creed, I want to say that one more time. We said it daily. All faculty and all children. And we took it to heart, what it means. And if you're here and you were one of us, please repeat it with me. I believe in myself, and I am here to succeed. I am responsible, respectful, safe, and prepared. I will do all I can to help myself and others learn, because everything I do today will affect my tomorrow. And it didn't matter if you were 5 or 55. Those words have meaning, and may we just continue to do what we've been doing for 50 years, thinking of the children, doing what's best for our students. Thank you.
Our next honoree is Mr. David Miles. Come on. Yes, you all have to come. You know, I'm impressed with a lot of things I've heard about Mr. Miles. This is my first time to get to meet him in person, but I'm most impressed that he's a substitute teacher. Who would do that? Unbelievable. That's great. Whereas the Board of Education for the City of Vestavia Hills, Alabama was established on April 30th, 1970, and whereas Vestavia Hills City Schools is celebrating its 50th anniversary by honoring the educators who have dedicated themselves to providing every student the opportunity to learn without limits. And whereas David Miles is an educator who's employed with Vestavia Hills City Schools from 1991 to 2014, and whereas Mr. Miles served as principal of Louis Pizitz Middle School during his 23-year career in Vestavia Hills City Schools, and whereas under Mr. Miles' leadership, Louis Pizitz Middle School was named a National Blue Ribbon School by the U.S. Department of Education in 1994, and whereas Mr. Miles conferred upon Pizitz Middle School the title of Best Middle School in America and sought to instill this belief in the hearts and minds of all students and staff. And whereas Mr. Miles partnered with faculty to create an annual Living History Day beginning in 2002 to honor members of the armed forces. And whereas Mr. Miles established a culture of character, excellence, and family at Pizitz, which is celebrated to this day throughout the words of the school's Pirate Creed. And whereas Mr. Miles continues to demonstrate servant leadership at Pizitz in various teaching and volunteer roles. And whereas the Board of Education wishes to honor Mr. Miles for his lifetime service and impact on thousands of lives in the city of Vestavia Hills and beyond, now therefore be it resolved by the Board of Education for the city of Vestavia Hills, Alabama, that the board hereby recognizes and congratulates David Miles as an inaugural inductee in the 2020 class of the Vestavia Hills City Schools Hall of Fame. Be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution shall be recorded upon the minutes of this meeting, and a copy presented to Mr. Miles, adopted and approved by the Board of Education for the City of Vestavia Hills, Alabama, this the 28th day of September 2020. Congratulations, Mr. Miles.
Where's Sam?
He had to go home. He was home.
Well, one of our brood, my youngest grandson, Samuel Jacob, apparently his appetite for food overwhelmed his appetite for glory. And he has departed. Wow. The thought that most overwhelms me at this moment is how little I have done to deserve an honor of this type. Every day I walked into the building and I said, Lord, please don't let me mess this up. Because there are so many wonderful, great things happening. And yes, was it Dr. Freeman that quoted it, or was it Chris? I don't remember. That it is about relationships, and I learned that way too late in my career. And when I learned it, I tried to learn it well. Because the power of the relationships of this community, it is the unique driving engine that has made and created what we have, what we have inherited, and what we pass on to others. A relationship where I could pick up a phone and talk to Jabbo Wagner and he would be there and listen to me. A relationship where I could just admire things Kay Tipton did, because I can assure you I was never, and none of my kids were ever on the math team. Someone told me one time, and I think it's true, mathematicians and scientists make life possible, but us liberal arts people make life beautiful. And then I look at Buddy Anderson. My goodness. I told him apparently the resolution of this is you had to either be an old geezer, a lovely lady, or a brilliant mathematician, or somebody who hired everybody. You see where we fall into. We're the two old geezers here. But the relationships and the roots that we have put down in this community mean so much. And for this community to bestow such an honor on so undeserving a person is powerful indeed. And I want to offer thanks first and foremost to a young woman that in the fall of 1970, I saw her in band marching on this field in band camp. And that was the most beautiful 4'11" package of 100-pound dark-haired thing I had ever seen in my whole life. And after many weeks of screwing up the courage, I finally met her out here between what was then the band room, right out on the, and I said, in my best Yankee accent, because we just moved here from up north a year before, would you like to go to the movies? And this beautiful thing said yes. And there is no way on this planet that I would be standing. And that isn't just potboiler from a husband to a wife that should be said. I can assure you there were days when I would not have made it had I not had her wisdom literally to sit down with me, and me completely terrified at the mess I had made. And she told me exactly what to do. And I went back and I did exactly what she told me. And that was a turnaround moment to my lovely wife, Nancy. Thank you so much, darling, for what you have done to bring this moment about. She also blessed me with 3 outstanding children who married 3 outstanding spouses. Very proud to say all of our children are in education. Our oldest daughter, Ashley, if you want to know what Nancy looked like when I asked her out, you look at my daughter Ashley, and that's what I saw, because they are spitting images of that day. Ashley and her husband Colin, who couldn't be here, and her 2 children, Alan, who is playing soccer at a small private Christian college down in Tampa, and her beautiful daughter and my #1 oldest granddaughter, Madison, are here with us, and we're proud, and she teaches gifted social studies. Is there any other kind? Gifted social studies at Hull Middle School in Gwinnett County, and is a tremendous teacher leader there. My oldest son and middle child, Patrick Miles, is an academic success counselor at the University of North Georgia, where she lives in Forsyth County with our beautiful daughter-in-law, Jessica, who is herself the department chair of the Department of Athletic Training and got her doctorate from UGA, for which we have never forgiven her. And her beautiful 2 daughters, we've got Piper right here, Piper Hanner, wave Piper, there she is, and her beautiful sister, whom I call Rosebud, that's Ansley Grace. And then our youngest child and my youngest son, Nathan, who's known to some of you as Coach Miles. He teaches honors U.S. history in the 10th grade at Vestavia Hills High School, coaches the Vestavia High School tennis team, goes down to Liberty Park and helps out with the football team. And she married a beautiful lady who has bestowed redheaded children to us, and she's going to have to take our youngest out, Emily, who is a nurse, and she bestowed upon us our beautiful Adeline Lee Miles, beautiful Eleanor Kate Miles, named after my mom, and our youngest grandson, Samuel Jacob, named after my father and my father-in-law. And I can assure you, their patience, their kindness, their love and support has meant all the world. And to be in the company of folks like Buddy, Helen, Holly, and Kay is just a reminder of me, as I think I'm just the token. And kind of reminds me of my nephew. He got married, Matthew, and he had a whole bunch of The guys he asked to be in the wedding at the last minute, he asked me, and I was the 6th guy. And I was so honored that he asked me. I found out later the reason he asked me is because if he got 6 tuxes, he got the 5 free for the other groomsmen. So I think they wanted to have an even 5 for this class, and so they pulled my name out of a hat somewhere. But thank you so much. I will tell you how deep it goes. Every one of my children went to Vestavia Hills schools, and every one of my children and my wife have worked in Vestavia Hills schools. Patrick was a special ed aide at Liberty Park. Nathan, you already know. My wife was the school nurse at East and was mentored by Helen Holly, then went to the high school and then at Liberty Park. Ashley was a site director for the extended daycare program. Not only did you provide my family education, you put food on our table, and we are grateful. I will add one final note of history. If you ever want to know, Sarah Weska is the one, and it was mentioned about the Pizitz family. It was really important to me at Pizitz Middle School that our kids understood the shoulders on which they stood. And I thought most of them, Pizitz, I'll never forget, we enrolled one new student. He had moved in from up north somewhere, and we were sitting down with him and talking to him and his mom about why they came to Vestavia Hills. At that time, there was a sign that pointed to Pizitz Middle School off of US 31, a little sign. Half of it had fallen down, and it said Zitz Middle School. This guy said, the only reason I'm here is I wanted to go to school named after a zit. So we were glad to take him. We take him however we can get him. But one story about the Pizitz family, we came this close of Vestavia High School being named Louis Pizitz High School. Do you know that story, buddy? You've been around since dirt. Do you know that story? You don't know? Sarah Weska, Pat Boone, who always called me, he said, whenever he'd call me, Jabby, he said, this is Buck Private Patrick H. Boone. Greatest lawyer I ever had hold my hand. We called him Foghorn Leghorn. He sounded just like a country lawyer. But he was fantastic. But Pat Boone was the young attorney, and the new board deputized him to negotiate with the Pizitz family for the land on which to build the high school. And the family said, we'll donate that land on the condition that you name the high school after the family patriarch, Louis Pizitz. Pat Boone took that back to the Board of Education, and they were very grateful, but they said, Pat, can you use all your powers of diplomacy and persuasion to see if they will let us name the school after the community? So he, being the faithful Buck Private that he was, he reported the Pizitz family, and he came back with this word. They said, here is what I worked out. They said they understood why we would want to name the school after the community. And we'll do it under one condition. If instead you will rename Vestavia Hills Junior High School Louis Pizitz School. And that's why we have a Vestavia Hills High School and a Louis Pizitz School. Someone's always asked, why are they a Pirates? Does anybody here know why we're the Pirates? Because before, Vestavia Hills Junior High School fed Berry High School. Berry were the Buccaneers, so those who came through Vestavia Junior High tied in by being the Pirates. And they've been the Pirates ever since. And someone called me one time and said, how about we become the Rebels? I said, if you want to kill me, go right ahead. It was our sense that that was their 3 years to be pirates. They had 4 years to be rebels, and it was going to be great, and they understood where they were going and why and how great it was going to be. But this was their identity, that they were pirates. And they were proud to be a mighty pirate. And I'm proud to be a part of this community. I'm proud to be part of this family. And I am incredibly humbled to have been given the opportunity by the Lord God above to engage in a profession that I consider the most impactful on the lives and trajectory of men and women other than preaching the gospel, and that is teaching. One of the exercises, and I'll close with this, that I learned and I shared with our faculty. I said, I want you to get out a piece of paper, and I want you to write down the names of 3 people outside of the Lord and your parents, those are givens, who have most positively impacted your life. That when their name passes through your mind, the endorphins flow, You get energy, and it profoundly influences who and what you are and the choices you have made. Write down 3 names. They did. I said, now raise your hand if at least one of those names is a school teacher. Nearly everybody raised their hand. I said, now flip the paper over. I want you to write down the names of 3 people that when you hear their names, it makes your toes curl under, your teeth grit, and you break out in a sweat. And if you ever see that person again, you'll have to bite your lip to tell them how badly you feel about how they treated you and how they impacted your life. And how miserable you were whenever you were in their presence. So they did. Raise your hand if there's at least one teacher on that list, and nearly everyone raised their hands. I said, ladies and gentlemen, our mission is to imagine the students whom we teach being asked that question. And which side of that paper will your name be on? It ain't about the stuff. It ain't about the computers. It ain't about the math. It ain't about the math team, really. It's about Kay Tipton and kids. It's about Carlton Smith, who did the 2 best things ever done for me in my career. He hired me and he never fired me. And I'll be forever grateful. And he mentored me long after he retired. When I had a decision to make, I called Carlton. And you know, he'd call me just to say hello. Relationships. Thank you for sharing your relationship with me. God bless.
Smiles. Other words. Dr. John Carlton Smith. You can use the seat here if you want to. Okay. Whereas the Board of Education for the City of Vestavia Hills, Alabama was established on April 30th, 1970, and whereas the Vestavia Hills City Schools is celebrating its 50th anniversary by honoring the educators who have dedicated themselves to providing every student the opportunity to learn without limits. And whereas Dr. John Carlton Smith was an educator employed with Vestavia Hills City Schools from 1985 to 1998, and whereas Dr. Smith served as the 3rd superintendent of Vestavia Hills City Schools during his 13-year career in the school system, and whereas Dr. Smith oversaw the growth of the school system's educational capacity during a period of city annexation by opening the Vestavia Hills Elementary Central School in 1989 and initiating capital projects at several other campuses, and whereas Dr. Smith worked to greatly enhance the teaching and learning capabilities of all schools through the introduction of classroom technology and internet access, and whereas under Dr. Smith's leadership, Vestavia Hills Elementary West, Louis Pizitz Middle School, and Vestavia Hills High School were each named National Blue Ribbon Schools by the United States Department of Education. And whereas Dr. Smith remained an active supporter of Vestavia Hills City Schools, its students, and its staff until his passing in June 2020. And whereas the Board of Education wishes to posthumously honor Dr. Smith for his lifetime of service and impact on thousands of lives in the city of Vestavia Hills and beyond, now therefore be it resolved by the Board of Education for the city of Vestavia Hills, Alabama, that the board hereby recognizes and congratulates Dr. John Carlton Smith as an inaugural inductee in the 2020 class of the Vestavia Hills City Schools Hall of Fame. Be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution shall be recorded upon the minutes of this meeting and a copy presented to the family of Dr. Smith. Adopted and approved by the Board of Education for the City of Vestavia Hills, Alabama, this the 28th day of September 2020. Ms. Smith, family, congratulations.
Thank you very much. My name is Ken. I'm Dad's eldest son.
I'd like to take a moment, if I could, to introduce some of my family members that were able to be here tonight. It's my brother Bill, my mother Martha, my wife Brenda, and my niece Elizabeth, who is a teacher herself and doing an outstanding job. And my nephew Will was not able to be here with us tonight. But I want to take a moment, if I could, just to thank Superintendent Freeman, Mayor Curry, the school board of Vestavia Hills, and City Council of Vestavia Hills for what they have meant to my family and to my father. I had an opportunity just a few days before my father fell ill to talk with him a little bit about this honor. And I can't tell you how humbled and thankful he was for this recognition. He would really love to be here tonight. Not really so much for the honor for himself, but see a community celebrate itself. That's what was so important to my father, were the people that made up a community and really came together to try to develop things. My father cared very much about children. He started out as an assistant football coach, and as much as in Union Springs, and as much as my father loved coaching, and believe me, he loved coaching, he saw an opportunity to broaden the scope of how he could help kids and how he could help improve their lives and the communities that they lived in. And he decided to go into administration. We lived in a lot of places before we came to Vestavia Hills. And I'm not going to try to list all of those because I'd probably leave something out somewhere along the way. But Vestavia Hills was someplace that was always special to him. I think each of those was important to him in his own way. But this was a place that he continued to live in. When he retired, he did not leave Vestavia Hills. My mother still lives here. My brother, niece still live here. And he loves this community. He loves the people. Heard that if you called my father, talk to you, he was always there to talk to you, even after he retired. My father loved to give advice. And sometimes whether you wanted it or not, you were going to get his advice. So if you called him, you better be sure that you were going to listen to him. It can be a little overwhelming sometimes over the years, but to be honest with you, he was usually right. And I really wish I had him here today to talk to and get advice from him. This honor means a great deal to my family, and to be a part of the inaugural class of inductees for this Hall of Fame is very important. And I just want to thank you all very much on behalf of the family, on behalf of my father, and just thank you very much for this recognition.
For our last inductees introduced, I wanted to invite a friend of mine, of this community, of the state, to say some words that Kay, you might not have expected, but I wanted Senator Wagner to offer a few words before I bring you and your family up this evening, and just some general comments about the night. Senator Wagner, welcome. Come on up.
Thank you, Dr. Freeman. Before I make any comments, one of my colleagues from the Senate sneaked in the back door. Dan Roberts, say hello. He's one of my good friends and a colleague, and we get along great, and it's good to have good friends in Montgomery to help out. Tonight is a very significant occasion for this entire community, the inductees, and the Board of Education. Doing what I do in Montgomery, I have the occasion to visit school systems, high schools, elementary schools, all over this state. And what we have in Vestavia Hills, and I can compare it with schools all over the state, we have the best of the best. And these inductees are the reason. We hire the best, They're well-trained. They know what to do in the classroom. And I am so proud of the inductees. I've known them all. Coach Anderson, coached two of my sons. One in '78, one in 1990. Both of them were tailbacks, right, Coach? I probably walked 1,000 miles around the high school track with your father. Many Sunday afternoons we would meet up at the high school and walk, and a lot of people miss it, and I'm one of them. I've known David, known Helen, been in and out of the schools, been in and out of classrooms, spoke to a commencement one time, and this school system means a lot to a lot of people. Let me reminisce for just a minute. I was elected to the Alabama House in 1966. I purchased a home on Mission Road in 1968. And I'm embarrassed to tell you what I had to pay for that home in 1968. It's gone up a little bit, okay? It's 4 blocks from the Board of Education. It's 4 blocks from Wall Park. It's 4 blocks from the West Elementary, where my beautiful, bright, young granddaughter teaches the 2nd grade, Caitlin Pierce. She might be someday as good as her Aunt Kay Wagoner Tipton, okay? She loves teaching. But when I bought the home in 1968, I had no idea what was fixing to happen in 1970. And it really made our community what it is today. Listen, I see them all over the state. We have the best of the best. We really do. But in 1970, the community leaders said, we need a school system. And they made it happen. And here again, it is a great school system, great coaches, great teachers, great administration, and I'm just so proud to call Vestavia my home. I've been in that same home since 1968, and Vestavia to me is the best community in the state of Alabama. There's a young lady in the crowd that happens to be my first cousin, and I may have had a little bit to do with her leaving Inslee High School, which is where we went to high school out on the western side of town. We went to Inslee, she went to college, got her degree, and started teaching at Inslee High School. And I was approached to ask Kay if she would be interested in coming to Vestavia. Am I telling this right, Kay? And she came and talked to the principal, the superintendent, and she did. She came to Vestavia, taught math, had the math team for years and years, very successful, won the state math tournament just about every year, went to the nationals, very successful. Scott, were you one of her students? She's good. but I don't know if I'm supposed to introduce Kay, but Kay, we're proud of you. I've known her since the day she was born. She's still young, beautiful, and still smart.
Is this everybody, Kay?
This
There's
is
several
all
rows back
two
there.
in college.
I got you. All right. Whereas the Board of Education for the City of Vestavia Hills, Alabama was established on April 30th, 1970, and whereas the Vestavia Hills City Schools is celebrating its 50th anniversary by honoring the educators who have dedicated themselves to providing every student the opportunity to learn without limits, and whereas Kay Tipton is an educator who is employed with the Vestavia Hills City Schools from 1971 to 2007. And whereas Ms. Tipton served as a mathematics teacher and mathematics department chair during her 36-year career at Vestavia Hills High School. And whereas Ms. Tipton founded the Mu Alpha Theta math team at Vestavia Hills High School with a charter granted in 1984. And whereas Ms. Tipton's Mu Alpha Theta teams earned 15 national convention championships during her leadership, including 9 consecutive championships from 1987 to 1995. And whereas Ms. Tipton established a culture of excellence in mathematics achievement at Vestavia Hills High School, which continues to this day. And whereas the Board of Education wishes to honor Ms. Tipton for a lifetime of service and impact on thousands of lives in the city of Vestavia Hills and beyond. Now therefore, be it resolved by the Board of Education for the City of Vestavia Hills, Alabama, that the Board hereby recognizes and congratulates Kay Tipton as an inaugural inductee in the 2020 class of the Vestavia Hills City Schools Hall of Fame. Be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution shall be recorded upon the minutes of this meeting and a copy presented to Ms. Tipton, adopted and approved by the Board of Education for the City of Vestavia Hills, Alabama, this, the 28th day of September 2020. Congratulations, Ms. Tipton.
I can't believe, I think I better take this off. I can't believe it's been 50 years. Can you believe that? I mean, I don't know what happened to the time, and I don't know how we got here. 50 years ago, I can remember as a young teacher going that first day, being kind of nervous, and going into the Pizitz building at the time. The high school was not even built when I first went there. But I am so grateful to all of you who have made this a possibility. It shows why Vestavia schools are like they are and as good as they are, because the community and the people choose to make it such a priority. I have so much to be thankful for, and most of all, my family here. In fact, I'd like Jabo and Marilyn to stand up too, because they're my family. But I have my daughter who started in kindergarten and went through 12th grade at Vestavia, Tori, and her husband, Dean, and her 2 children, Luke and Lainey. And then my son, who started in 1st grade at Vestavia, graduated, went 12 years at Vestavia, his wife, Sandy, and 2 of their children. 2 are in college and couldn't be here, but 2 of their children, Camden and Ella. And of course, so glad to have my cousin Jabo and his wife Marilyn. Marilyn, stand up. I'm very fortunate also to have some really fine friends that are here. My college roommate Diane and her husband Art. My good friend that I taught with for 30-something years at Vestavia, she was the counselor. Joanne Huddleston and Preston, her husband, and her daughter, who went to school here when it was at Vestavia, Jennifer. And then 2 of my dear friends from church, Wanda and Jim Neal, and I so appreciate all of you coming. And these people that are here have meant so much to me. Dr. Smith, who supported me every time I went and asked for something that I needed to help make that math team better. Buddy was in the math department with me all those years. Helen was the principal for my daughter when she taught at Liberty Park. And David Miles and his family are part of my family. All of them so close to us all through the years. And I think back about the things that I'm most grateful for, and there's 3 or 4 things I can think of. The first thing I think of is even as a small child, 2nd, 3rd grade, I loved math. In fact, what was fun for me in the summer, I had a neighbor who was a year ahead of me, and she would teach me what math she learned her year before I even got to the next grade. And that's what we did during the summer. And then I went to college. Diane was my roommate, and I had planned to be a pharmacist. And so that's what I thought when I went to Stanford. I room with Diane, and I was going to be a pharmacist. I'm very thankful I got married my freshman year in college. And I decided I couldn't take 4 or 5 years to study pharmacy. I had to get out and work. So I thought, why am I doing that? I love math, and I could be a math teacher. And I already had all these math courses. And I was able to finish in 3 years, going in the summer, and get out and start working. So I'm very thankful for that. And I'm also thankful that when we moved to Vestavia, I first taught at Inslee because my math teachers called me. They didn't have a math teacher. I was expecting my son, and they said, we need a math teacher. Will you come teach? And I said, well, I'm expecting. And of course, at that time, they didn't want you to teach if you were expecting. But anyway, they called me. They needed a math teacher that badly. So I went over and taught at Inslee and taught there the next year also. And then we moved to Vestavia, and so my cousin Jabbo said, we've started this new system, and it sure would be a good place for you to teach and close by. And he got me an appointment with Dr. Clark, Bill Clark, and I came and interviewed with him and was able to get that job. What a blessing that I got to teach at Vestavia High School. There is no place that I could have taught that could have been any better than Vestavia. How could I have had any finer students than one that's sitting right over here, Scott Brown? I told Joanne, I used to tell everybody, if he ever runs for president, I'm going to be the first one out there voting. That's how wonderful my students were. I was very fortunate to have wonderful colleagues to work with, wonderful principals and superintendents who were so supportive, and wonderful students. And I can remember going to Duke University to compete one time, and this school, Thomas Jefferson School of Math and Science, would be there to compete against us. I don't know whether you know about that school. It just came up on my news feed this week that they have consistently been the top school in the nation in national merit finalists. They are 350 this year. They have anywhere between 300 and 500 national merit finalists every year. And so we went to Duke, and they were there too. And when they called out the results, they were second, and we came in first by 1 point. But that's the kind of students that I was privileged to teach. So it wasn't me, it was them that made me look good. And I just want to thank all of you for making me one of these honored people to be in this Hall of Fame. Thank you so much.
Hey, Ms. Tiston, we need a math teacher. Can we talk? Wow. Well, you know, as a new person to the community, I have to tell you that I don't know that I've been in a room where I felt like I was standing amongst giants. You just know the feeling when you're around them, and what an amazing group of educators and leaders. And what is more especially impressive to me is the way that they feel like family, which is such a special part of being in this community. Thank you guys so much. Before we conclude tonight's events, we would like to offer special thanks to everyone who worked to make this celebration possible. Dr. Chris Pennington, Andy Carpenter, Donna Morgan, Brent Coleman, and the entire Pizitz faculty and staff. Ms. Amy Farr and the Pizitz student ambassadors for conducting campus tours. Martha Manley, Margaret Ann Denton, and the Vestavia Hills High School event planning students for assisting with preparations. Jennifer Lynch and the Pizitz PTO for assisting with decorations for the open house and ceremony. Jarrell Horton for his musical performances. Stosh Barra and See It Productions for filming of our 50th anniversary video. The members of the 50th anniversary working group who met more than a year ago to plan our celebration this year. And the members of the Vestavia Hills City Schools Hall of Fame Committee who solicited nominations for and selected tonight's honorees. Whit McGee was recently named the Alabama Communicator of the Year and now President-elect of the Alabama School Public Relations Association, and he's sitting up there filming this tonight beside his wife and best friend, Laura. Obviously, it seemed like he would be the perfect choice to lead the 50th anniversary celebration, and he was. So I want to express my heartfelt appreciation for his leadership and coordination of the 50th anniversary celebration. Whit has invested great time and effort into making this a special occasion. Thank you, Whit. Thank you, Lauren, for loaning him to us for a bit of time. As you leave this evening, you will find forms by the door to begin the nomination process for the 2021 class of the Hall of Fame. So please take one of these forms with you and let our committee know who should be considered for next year's class. Until we see each other again, be well. Have a good evening.